Good morning, everyone. My name is Zane Agostini. I'm CEO of CID Insurance Programs, and I want to welcome you to a new webinar that we're doing that is really about understanding the premium audit process for workers' comp, which can be, really frustrating for the insured. So this is a great day to go over that. I also want to introduce my co-instructor, Darby Fisher, who's our work comp renewal underwriter. Say hi, Darby.
Hi there.
And then I want to introduce Jacob Cole, who's our lead marketing specialist. He's always behind the scenes, but go ahead and say hi, Jacob.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so let's talk some logistics, which everyone should probably know by now for webinars, is everyone's going to be muted, but you will be able to hear but not speak. But your voice is really important to us, so we would like you to pose questions that you have in the chat room at any time throughout the webinar, and we'll stop and answer those questions for you. So we love questions because we know you're learning and understanding when you ask questions. And again, we want your feedback at the end because we'll offer a short survey so that we can find out how we're doing, if you've got any ideas for future webinars, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about what we're going to be, our objective is today with this webinar. It's really understanding how the audit can impact the premium for your insured. And then Darby's going to talk about the documents that your insured will be required to prepare so that you have a better understanding of what's needed, what your insured is going through, and then find out what to expect during the process. What is an audit, and what do they have to go through in order to successfully complete it. So let's get started. What is the purpose of a work comp audit? Some people don't know, and so we're here today to just really help you understand what your insureds are going through. So it's an annual review of the actual payroll records, and it's performed at the request of the insurance company. Now it definitely can vary by state, but most states, a annual audit is required, and that's in order to make sure that they've charged the right premium for the right exposure. And this really, the audit will determine the final cost of the workers' comp policy after the policy period ends. The workers' comp audit, it's a checkup to make sure that the carrier has the most up-to-date information on the company and employees. And it's really, some of it's on the honor system, and some of it is going to be more involved the bigger the company they are insuring. Okay, keep going. Okay, so what are some of the important things that you need to do as a broker when you're working with your insured on a workers' comp policy? And this could be throughout the year, but at least at renewal, and if you're writing new business, these are the important areas to pay attention because things change. And a lot can happen in a year, and with this COVID year, a lot has happened. So here are some of the questions you want to ask. Did they expand? And in that question, you're going to find, did they add another location? Locations are super important because wherever that insured goes to work, that's where you're going to be. You need to have that location added to the policy. It needs to be on there because if there's an injury, this happens more often than I like, that someone turns in a claim and claims adjuster contacts us and says, well, that location is not on the policy. And so that's something to pay attention to. It needs in order for coverage to be afforded, that location needs to be there. If they're a contractor and they're going out to different jobs and working temporarily at different places, that's not that location. Those locations do not need to be added. However, if you if they are going to permanently work at one site for an extended period of time and go to work there every day, then you might want to consider adding that location. Again, in an expansion, you may have hired new employees. So in doing so, that's going to change the payroll. And that a lot of times people get caught on that towards the end, especially with this COVID changes. A lot of people reduce their payroll, and then now people are starting to increase their payroll. They're going to get hit hard on these audits if we're not checking to see if there's changes in how many employees they have, and that equals the payroll that they're going to have. Did you train employees to perform different tasks? Okay, so that could change the class codes that they're recorded under, and that rate could vary. So that could increase payroll if you've moved an employee into another position and then that changes their class code. It could go up or down depending on what you train them to do and what changes that made. And then again, I talked a little bit about the reduction in staff because COVID has really caused that. But again, once they go back to normal, they're going to be hiring new employees or bringing back the old employees. Last but not least, subcontractor exposures. This is one that nobody really thinks about too much, and that is the carriers are going to be looking for subcontractors that don't meet the definition of an independent contractor, like they've got a contractor's license or they have a business license, they carry their own insurance, and they have their own workers' comp for their employees. And if you don't have proof of insurance for those contractors, subcontractors, then that what you've paid them will be included in your payroll, and that will cause an increase in payroll in premium as well. So all of these things need to be paid attention to in order for you to not have hiccups with your insured. And these are things that can upset an insured more than anything else when they have problems at the audit time. One more thing I want to talk about, and I'm giving this one its own slide, and that's change in entity structure. Okay, did the company change their entity structure? And what I mean by that is, did they go from, and I see this often, did they go from a corporation to an LLC? Did they, go from a sole proprietor to an LLC? Did they go from a sole proprietor to a corporation? So those are completely different structures of a company entity designation. And so those are filings that you make with the state, and so that there's difference in there's differences. Well, I'll go over the balance of this, and then we'll talk about the forms. Have there been any changes to the ownership structure? So let's say we have a corporation. So a corporation could have had one owner, 100% shareholder, and now he's added, another owner, giving them maybe 20% ownership. So now it's an 80-20 split. That becomes important. That has to be reported because it can cause problems with the audit. And then, did the company change ownership? Was it sold? So that's another area. We run across that, more than I'd like to mention, that, the broker didn't even know that they had, and the insured didn't tell them that that someone bought them out or they merged with another company, and it's a completely different set of ownership at this point. That will affect the audit. That will affect the current policy for sure as well. So how does this all impact? Why are we talking about this? What does it have to do with an audit? Well, anytime there's changes like this, new exclusion forms are required for those owners, and each of those entity types has a different set of rules and a different set of forms that have to be required. And it's important to know that not all ownership can be excluded. There are rules for small percentage of ownership that will not allow them to be excluded. So to those, if you really want to rely on your underwriter here at CID Insurance Programs to help you ensure that we are properly getting those forms, because this is a huge problem that we find that occurs over and over again. Because at the audit time, if the wrong forms have been filed, or not the right forms, or no forms at all, or they weren't filled out correctly, then these owners are going to be charged for payroll, and that's where the premium ends up spiking at the audit time, and it becomes a real problem. So what should the insured know about a work comp audit? And Darby, remind me where you take over. And
it's going to be after this one.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Because I can't see our names on them. All right, everyone. What should the insured know about a work comp audit? Okay. And again, I'm trying to help you as you're sort of the middleman in all of this process, and so sometimes you're in the dark with that. So you don't even know what the process is. So this is just a short, Darby's going to go into a lot more detail. I'm going to give you just a sort of a summary. And so that premium audit is going to be performed after each policy period expired. And really it's in order to verify that payroll, the class code, and that subcontractor exposure. When working your upcoming renewal, it's important for you to remind the insured that they will be receiving that audit reporting request. That's where some of the problems really get started, is when the insured ignores it, doesn't understand what they've received, or everyone's a procrastinator at some level, or decides to procrastinate on it. And this is, Darby's going to talk about non-compliance, because that's a serious problem with that early process of starting the audit. So they're going to request payroll documentation, but they may require a phone interview. So it's really important to know what that process is going to be. And again, Darby's always available to help you understand what that carrier's process will be. She's developing some cheat sheets that she can send out to brokers to help them, help their insured with that process. Okay, Darby, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. So how does the audit work? Before the end of the policy term, the insured will receive a notice directly from the carrier regarding their upcoming final audit. The insured will receive an audit questionnaire listing the items needed in order to complete their final audit, along with a blank final audit form for the insured to fill out. As the broker, you can always request a copy from the carrier or reach out to your wholesale broker to provide you with it. This request will detail all information needed to be provided to verify payroll and class codes. We'll get into those items in the next slide, but make sure to be in contact with the insured during this time to obtain all the necessary documents from them, as the insured has 30 days to comply with their final audit. So it's really important you're talking to your insured and you're getting the information required to complete this. Usually the carrier will request the insured to complete a voluntary workers' comp audit. So the insured will submit their completed final audit by mail or through the insured's online portal. However, for larger accounts, carriers will sometimes request an in-person audit. Physical audits are usually requested 60 days after the expiration date of your policy. During these times, it may be a little bit different over the phone until things get back to normal. However, the auditor will notify the insured by mail or phone to schedule the appointment. So it's really important to be in contact with them if your insured has a larger account or a larger business. Once you've completed the physical or voluntary workers' comp audit, the carrier will process this, and it takes about 30 to 90 days from the submission date. So once the carrier has processed the audit, they're going to send the insured the final audit, and this can result in two things: additional or refunded premium. So if the payroll submitted on the audit is lower than what was originally quoted by the carrier, the insured will receive a refund. But if the actual payroll is higher than what was quoted, the insured will owe additional premium to the carrier. And as Anaya mentioned before, it's super important for the insured to communicate all changes, and especially payroll changes, with the broker throughout their policy term, so the insured doesn't end up owing premium to the carrier. Good practice would be checking in with the insured every couple months to see if there's been any changes to their policy. So we'll move to the next slide. What information will be required? In order for a final audit to be completed, we want you to know the type of information the carrier will be requesting from the insured. Payroll summaries for the policy period they're describing, so make sure the insured is submitting accurate payroll records, payroll tax reports, and the IRS Form 941 for the last 4 filed quarters. If the insured has subcontractors or leased employees, they will also need to provide certificates of insurance for each lease employee or subcontractor if applicable. We can move on to the next slide. What if your insured does not respond to the audit? This is a huge issue. So if the insured fails to complete their final audit, a few or all of the following things can happen to the insured's policy. Non-complying with a final audit will cause the insured's policy to go into cancellation. Some carriers will estimate the final audit with all payroll in the highest class code, resulting in additional premium due to the carrier, while other carriers will instead add a costly audit non-compliance charge to the insured's audit. I've seen charges anywhere from $3,000 to $15,000 on top of the original quoted premium. So if the audit's not completed, the non-compliance charge will stand, and the insured will have to pay a dramatic increase in premium. The last outcome of complying with the final audit is the carrier will automatically endorse the current term to match what was reported on the insured's final audit, completed or estimated. So I want to stress the importance of complying with your final audit, as you're now aware that by not doing so, it's going to cost the insured and you, the broker, extra time, work, and money. Slide. How does the insured resolve non-compliance with the audit? So if the insured is deemed non-compliant or delinquent, they're going to receive a notice from the carrier, and they need to provide the missing information that the carrier is requesting as soon as possible to resolve the issue. Most carriers will list what is missing to complete their audit. However, if that's not the case, it's the broker's responsibility to reach out to the carrier or have their wholesale broker reach out in order to obtain that information. On larger policies, carriers may also require a phone interview in addition to the request for the audit information. This is usually for larger accounts, so please make sure the insured is aware that that is mandatory. Next, we have audit disputes. What about audit disputes? How can you tell if you need to file a workers' compensation audit dispute? Here's a few things you can look for. The audit payroll doesn't match what you reported, the payroll is distributed differently by class code, or the owner's payroll is included in the final audit. If you notice mistakes on your final audit, the broker can request an audit worksheet from the carrier's auditor who completed it. Some mistakes made by the auditor can be easily solved by providing supporting documentation of the insured's case. However, with disputes that are not solved so easily and need extra time in order to resolve them, the insured will need to file a formal dispute with the carrier. Depending on the case, the insured may need to provide documentation in order to refute the audit. And it's important to note that the formal audit dispute, it needs to be on the insured's letterhead and signed by the insured. I want to stress the importance of making sure the insured keeps a record of everything sent to the carrier, because in this case, if the insured wants to file a formal audit dispute, they will need to provide documentation of what they sent in.
Okay.
So I'll give it back to Anae now. Yeah, no problem.
Great information. So, what's going to be the takeaway? And again, if you have any questions, please put them in our chat room. We would be glad to answer any questions that you have. So let's talk about the best practice approach for final audits. And I mentioned this briefly earlier, but audits can be so frustrating for the insured. And frankly, none of us like to do a lot of paperwork. And that's, it's a constant challenge. And audits really are all about paperwork. They're like filing for a loan, it feels like sometimes, because there's just a lot of regulation around workers' comp and the requirement of an audit to show proof of the actual payroll. And so be aware of that. This is the easiest way to lose your insured, to have them go out and find another broker and shop without even, without it even for valid, not even for necessarily valid reasons, but just because they get frustrated. So it's, all of us working together to make sure that the insured, we make it as easy as possible for the insured is really important. And then encourage your insured to respond to the audit sooner than later. You want to encourage them. And I mentioned earlier, when you're working that renewal is the best time to make sure that you remind your insured that they will be receiving the paperwork for the renewals shortly. And sometimes they'll send it right before the renewal, but at least right after the renewal, in order to get that audit process started for the expiring policy. And then help your insured understand the penalties involved with noncompliance. Now, if they don't comply, as Darby said, if they don't fill out the initial paperwork and provide the documentation, they're going to settle that audit not in the insured's favor. They're going to penalize them. And they put everything in the higher class code. They may end up charging that penalty charge. It depends on the carrier and how they choose to do it. But anyways, it's going to potentially triple the premium for your insured. That and so compliance will remove that or any headaches or frustrations that your insured is going to go through. The other thing is if they don't respond and then they end up with this the adapted audit form done by the carrier because they didn't comply, then their current policy will go into cancellation, and that's everything goes downhill from there. So this can really spike and go out of control, and we don't want to lose. We don't want to lose the policies. I know you don't want to lose the policies, and it's better to stay ahead of that and keep your insured moving in the right direction so that they don't get frustrated. And then, as Darby said, keep copies of all your records provided for the audit just to be safe. And then be sure to check in with your insured on exposure changes, as I talked a lot about at the beginning of the webinar. That is a super important factor that's going to affect the audit in a negative, usually negative if not addressed up front. So that concludes the best practices, but we do have a question. Do most carriers offer pay as you go in order to minimize or avoid additional premium altogether at the end of the policy term? Yes, that is true. A lot of that is a helpful plan, the pay as you go. It has its own set of headaches because it depends on the company and their ability to report monthly. And so it can work in a positive way, and it can work in a negative way. But that is definitely, I agree with you. And I think all carriers have some form of pay-as-you-go plan that could be helpful to prevent this. But it will not prevent things like class code changes, entity changes, location changes. So all of those things still need to be addressed with the insured, at least at prior to the renewal, so that we at least we get the new policy, the renewal policy set up right. Any other questions? Well, let's see here. Let's go to the last page. So I think that wraps up our seminar for today, and I want to thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions still, please put them in, and we will answer them even if we've all signed off. Visit our website, cidinsurance.com. We just have a brand new website, and it's got a lot of tools and that are helpful templates, marketing pieces that are there for you, and it has recorded webinars, and then all of our up-and-coming webinars are there. So you can go watch webinars to your heart's content, because we've got a lot of them on there on different coverages, different classes of business, and the types of insurance that they need. So really, we try to be a team helping you do a better job with commercial insurance. And please send your submissions to submissions at CID Insurance, and Lexi Goldspring or Johnson. Sorry, she just got married, or she changed her name. So it's Lexi Johnson is our new business underwriter, and she's there for you as well. So we look forward to doing business with you, and those that are doing business with you, thank you for your business. Take care. Have a great day.